Um, Pretty soon after I was discharged, I realized that I was very, very tired. I was quite a lot of fatigue in almost everything that I did. I was really struggling with everyday tasks. Um, at the time of my heart attack, I would say I wasn't the fittest person in the world, but I used to be quite fit. I used to run marathons. I used to play squash, actually at county level. So I was used to doing things fairly easily. Um, and soon after my discharge, I couldn't even walk up the stairs without getting out of breath. I didn't really understand why. I think a lot of it was obviously heart damage because I'd had a heart attack, which led to my cardiac arrest. My heart was actually damaged. So some of it was that, some of it was medication. I was on quite a strong beta blocker. And that the fatigue was quite difficult to live with, partly because I didn't understand it, but mainly because of the frustration that I couldn't do everything that I used to be able to do. I don't know whether I really ever developed a strategy for coping with that. I think maybe you just get used to it. Although I was able to, in consultation with my GP and my cardiologist, I was able to play around with my medication, not in terms of how much I took, but when I took them. And we tried to take in half in the morning, half in the evening. So there was a period of about 6 months where we played around with medication to try to improve things. And now it's got to a level where it's manageable, I would say.
Initially, in the early stages of my recovery and on release of hospital, the fatigue was real. It was debilitating. Walking up the stairs was problematic. Once I'd been up and down stairs once or twice during the day, it would hit me for six, and I'd be snoozing on the sofa. As time went on and my recovery started to get better, I coped with it a little bit better. It became less of a problem as I became fitter again. It took me a while to understand why this was making me feel like it was and how to cope with it. But eventually, I just listened to my body and rested as and when I needed to. It probably took about 6 months for me to feel anything like I did before. But on the whole, the fatigue lasted several months, probably into years, a couple of years really. 6 years on, not a problem anymore. Occasionally, I feel like I need to say enough is enough and have a rest, but it's few and far between. So thankfully, it's not something that has affected my life post-recovery.
So yeah, fatigue, big problem for all of us, I think, really. It was, in the beginning, it was awful. Like, I was sleeping 18 hours a day. I was only awake 6 hours and barely doing anything, very frustrated. Like, I remember the first time going down into town, which was literally like 500, 600, 700 yards from where I lived at the time. And I'd get probably about 400 yards and I'd be like, oh, I can't do this. I need to go back. And yeah, it took months for me to get past that, but it does improve in time, or at least it did for me. It improved massively over time. And one of the ways I found to get through it really is to have a short nap, literally an 8-10 minute nap whenever I start to feel too tired. And it works perfectly when I'm at work. I work 12-hour days over the weekend, and I get a sort of 20-minute break halfway through the day, and I just take 10 minutes of that and just get my head down and have a couple of Z's, so to speak. But yeah, over time it got a lot better, a hell of a lot better. The idea of walking a mountain 6 months after the cardiac was non-existent. You know what I mean? I thought I'm never going to be able to do that. And 4 years on, nearly 4 years on, I've walked 3 mountains. I've got loads of challenges left to do. So yeah, like getting on a hell of a lot better now. And I think anyone that is going through fatigue, I think if they limit themselves and just sort of listen to the body. If you feel really tired and it's 1 o'clock, have a short 5-10 minute nap if you can. And I think you'll find you'll cope a lot better during the day.
So after my cardiac arrest, for a good sort of 4 or 5 months afterwards, I can remember having episodes of fatigue and feeling absolutely overwhelmed. So although at this point I was at work and I was still on phase return, I would come home and feel utterly exhausted, like I was walking through treacle. I was sleeping very poorly, so I just put this down to this as well, because I had lots of flashbacks during the night. My husband was also sleeping very poorly. Each day I would go for slightly longer walks. I would listen to my body, which would be my biggest advice to anybody. And slowly over time, the fatigue settled and I would gain much, much stronger each day. Luckily for me, I feel that now my fatigue is very, very well controlled. I still do have episodes of feeling fatigue and it can come out of nowhere. I can be absolutely fine for weeks at a time. And then all of a sudden, again, I feel utterly exhausted to the point where I struggle to put one foot in front of the other. However, thankfully, those times are much less seldom. And I've just got to learn to listen to my body now. There is no trigger for this. I still work full time. So at times, I can have very busy days at work and come home and just feel normally tired like the rest of the population would. But there's other times where I can be on a day off and just feel absolutely, utterly exhausted. Thankfully, my sleep pattern is much better. So I normally sleep very well at night. But again, I do have episodes where I just need to sleep in the afternoon or I need to go to bed early evening. But as time goes on, that does settle and the periods are much, much longer.
Yeah, fatigue is something that I know I suffer with, and a lot of people have gone through similar experiences. It's difficult to balance the reasons. When I had the original problem, I weighed about 12 stone. Then obviously I had a period of inactivity at home, waiting to have the pacemaker defibrillator put in. But also it was the start of COVID. My wife was so worried about me getting any kind of infection. I was virtually locked into the house for 5 months. So that wasn't good. I wasn't moving enough. And over the last 2 years, I've put on about 4 stone in weight, even though I'm actually quite active. But I find I'm active from the time I get up. I've always been a morning person. But now, when it gets to 3 o'clock in the afternoon or so, most days I start feeling quite tired. I think it's the weight. I'm struggling to get the weight off, even though I'm trying. The medication, I've got beta blockers, etc. Doesn't help. So it is something, also age, I'm 71, so I should be slowing down, I guess, a bit. But I know I'm nowhere near as active as I used to be, and I don't have the stamina that I used to have. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. But, you have to accept it. It's frustrating at times that you can't do certain things. You have to rely on other people to do stuff that you would have always done, but that's just the way it goes.